Good morning, everyone. I'm Isaac from ADM Computing, Kent's highest rated and longest standing IT service provider. Now, we support businesses across the Southeast with reliable, forward-thinking IT and cybersecurity services without the jargon or long-term contracts. And thanks for joining us for today's session. Now, artificial intelligence is transforming the way we defend our systems, but with so much noise out there, it's not always clear what's real or useful. To help bring clarity to this, we're sharing a fireside chat with two industry experts, Frank Dickson, Group VP of Security and Trust at IDC, and Chester Wisniewski, Director and Field CTO at Sophos. They'll explore what AI can and can't do in cyber defense and how attackers are using it, and when to rely on AI versus human expertise. Now, this session is pre-recorded, but the ADM and Sophos team are here in the live chat to assist you with any questions you might have throughout. So again, please do enjoy this session. We look forward to hearing your questions in the chat, and let's get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Taylor, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for what I think is going to be a really interesting conversation. Today, we're going to be discussing the rise of artificial intelligence and how that has revolutionized cybersecurity, how much of that promise is real, as well as how organizations can leverage AI to enhance their defenses. And we could not have a better lineup joining us for this conversation to help us break down some of the realities, opportunities, and myths that surround AI and how to best navigate AI and the AI hype in cybersecurity. So I am going to stop sharing and introduce you to our speakers today. So joining me is Frank Dickson, Group Vice President of Security and Trust at IDC, and Chester Wisniewski, Director and Field CTO for Sophos. Gentlemen, if you don't mind, I thought it'd be nice for us to just take a few moments right here at the start for you to introduce yourselves to the audience. Tell us about yourself and your background. Frank, I'm going to ask you to start if that's okay.
Sure. So my name is Frank Dickson. I lead the security and trust team here at IDC. Basically, my role is to lead a team of 19 or 20 cybersecurity analysts. I would call us market strategists, right? So how do people approach, how do they deal with, how they address this whole problem of cybersecurity? And we deal with three core audiences, right? So we communicate and work with folks like Sophos and other vendors in the industry. We talk and work with the investment community a lot because they're trying to translate all these messages into what it means. And then finally, we do an awful lot of work with end users in terms of how they approach cybersecurity, how they improve cybersecurity metrics, and how they deal with new and emerging technologies. So yeah, that's me.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Frank. Chet, give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. I'm a director of the Field CTO team at Sophos, and I've been at Sophos about 21 and a half years and doing cybersecurity work for 25 plus years. And our team is sort of the interface between all the researchers at Sophos and then the outside world that needs to benefit and learn from all that research that we're doing, right? So we have access to our data scientists and our malware researchers and the people looking at web threats and firewalls and all this kind of stuff within Sophos. And then we interact with the outside world through, CISAT, Department of Homeland Security, through answering the press's questions about hacks and breaches and malware incidents and what the latest exploits are and how they're being impacting customers' environments and that type of thing. So really, we're kind of that interface between the research world at Sophos and everybody on the outside who can benefit from the research that we're doing.
That's awesome. So you guys can all see why I thought these would be the perfect people for us to have this discussion with. So thank you guys for the background. Frank, I'm going to start off with you. Obviously, for those of us who have been in cybersecurity for a long time, over the past several years, if you attend any trade show or walk the floors of any of the conferences, every cybersecurity vendor is in some form or another talking about AI and touting their use of AI. And it's basically sending a very clear signal that we now see that AI is an integral part of cyber defense. And while end users are excited about it, there's definitely a sense that they could get lost in some of what might be considered hype or find it challenging to know how to best move forward to embrace this opportunity. If you can tell us a little bit more about some of that research you're mentioning at IDC and the kind of work that you're doing that's around this topic, maybe share some of that insight for us.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of core things that we do in terms of the research we do. We're always in the bleeding edge, right? And so, maybe 2-3 years ago, we were dealing with how do cybersecurity tool sets work with LLMs? How do we improve the researcher's experience? Last year, we're talking about, okay, great, we attach an LLM to our various tools, but how do we actually get value out of these things, right? We can dream about what they are. We can dream about what it can do, but like what they actually can do and what researchers actually find that they should do are two very, very different things. And then, of course, there's the bleeding edge. Like right now, we're doing a whole lot of research about agentic AI and what does it mean and how do you secure an LLM and what is the importance of safety features like accuracy vis-a-vis jailbreaking or prompt injection or all these bleeding edge kind of topics. I think though, as I look at what customers and end users actually come to me about, we're kind of like I would call myself the person of last response. Like, we've asked the question internally, we've asked everyone internally, no one seems to be sure. It's like, all right, like, what do we do less? Like, let's ask Frank. Frank will know. So I'm kind of like, I'm at the bottom of the hill. When everything rolls down, it hits me. So much of the questions that I get, I think fall into a couple of core key buckets. First of all, there were the questions that were, hey, my company's already implemented an LLM-based application. Oh my God, how do I secure that? And typically, if we think about AI, it's not new. Like, it's not new. We've been doing it for quite some time. So we look at securing an LLM as part of an application. We've been doing that for quite some time. Analytics is nothing new. So oftentimes I'll go, well, here's how I would do it. And I can't tell you, I was at a conference one time, I had 5 straight meetings for different CISOs. That was their question. Hey, we've implemented this application. It's got this LLM connect. How do I secure it? And I give them my 5 things they should touch on, the 5 new control points of digital transformation. They go, great, that's what I did. Good. And they leave. And they felt happy about that. And I'm like, I didn't tell you anything, but I just confirmed. The second big category of questions that I get as it relates to not my applications that I'm implementing an LLM on, but third-party applications, right? All these SaaS-based apps that have got, various LLMs or analytics to them. How do we secure that? What does that mean? We've all heard kind of the horror stories, like we've taken our proprietary data, throw in a third-party LLM, and all of a sudden it popped up somewhere, right? So that's probably the second category. And then the third category are these let's call it LLM specific type threats, the prompt injections, the safety features, the accuracy features, things that are unique to generative AI. And so those are going to be the big 3 categories, what customers come to me for.
Okay, that's interesting. We'll hit some of those as we get into the content today, because we are going to talk about the applications as well as some of the risks and leave the audience with some of that pragmatic advice on how to step into this space a little bit more securely. Just curious, as you think about those 3 big bucket areas and the types of conversations you're having, have you seen these significantly change over the last several years, or how have these conversations evolved over time?
Oh my God. Yeah, they've completely changed. And I think every year it's a new bucket of questions, right? Uh, the first questions, when LMs first came out is, boy, we all went into ChatGPT real quick, and boy, we got a rap song on instantly, and we're like, oh great, I could write a rap song. What does that mean, right? And so I think a lot of the first level of questions was, what do we think this is going to be? The second level of questions is, this is coming. What will it be? The I think last year's questions were more, okay, it's here. It's not moving as fast as we thought. What do we do? And now, realistically, the questions this year are much, much more tactical. And we kind of get it. They fall in those four buckets. They're security, using AI to improve security, protecting my own applications with AI, protecting myself, my identity, and my data in third-party applications, and then how do I deal with LLMs?
Yeah, that's interesting. It does kind of support the fact that it's not just the hype, right? That this is here, and people are now looking about how to embrace it and leverage it safely.
Yeah, but there's always two parts to this, right? There's the reality, there's the hype. The reality, and then there's still hype, like agentic AI, like, ooh, agentic AI. Oh, I don't need to do security anymore because I got this agentic thing, and I'm going to hit this magic whiz bang button, and all my cybersecurity problems are going to go away. Right? There's still hype. Yeah.
I mean, we were talking just in the as we were in the backstage before this, talking about, that easy button. And obviously we have to balance and the value of the technology and the advancements and the innovation, and the importance of the human layer still that exists in that. We're going to dig into some of this. So I'm going to pull it up and continue to keep us moving along here. And let me see if I can get this to work. So speaking of technology and human layer, let's see if I can get Goldcast to do what I want it to do. Okay. So we do have a lot that we want to cover today and give you just a fraction of the information that Frank has in his head around this topic, as well as Chet. We're going to cover some of the various categories and the more common AI types and models. We'll discuss some of the applications that Frank was referencing there, as well as tackle a bit in the end around the risks and the potential malicious applications of AI, rounding it all off with some really pragmatic advice on how you can navigate this. But we wanted to keep our senses of humor as we walk through all of this. So we've peppered in some images from past movies, older movies than you'd think, that have been featuring AI. So if you recognize the movie and you can name the title or even maybe the release date, you can pop that into the chat window just for fun. So, all right, Chet, we're going to dig in by taking on the definitions of some of the common types of AI. So I'm going to ask you to help us by just starting with a level set. So, Frank was rattling off a lot of the different terms, and some of them might be new to our audience, but if you can talk through some of the most common types of AI, both types and size, as we go through this, and also maybe bring some examples of real world applications to life so that it can really kind of land for people in the audience. I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I think it's important that we have a bit of a level set because back to the title having the word hype in it, I mean, there is a bit of hype out there, but there's also a bit of confusion because this isn't a new thing. We've all been at some form of things being called AI for quite some time now. Here at Sophos, we're coming up on 10 years since we did an acquisition of a company called Invincia, and that kind of kicked off our initial adoption of deep learning AI, which is something now that we're finding, throughout our products and a lot of our competitors' products as well. And we've been referring to that AI for like 10 years, but suddenly AI is also the hot new thing. And so, I think it's helpful to clarify this. When we're talking about deep learning AI and neural network models, this kind of stuff, you're probably experiencing this in your endpoint security software, especially on mobile phones. Certainly, that's one application where you can build a very specific model to look for malware. And by training it with a very well-defined training set. And that's one of the differences here, right? When we're talking about deep learning AI, we're usually taking something that's well labeled. We have a group of known things that are malware, and we have a group of known things that are not malware. And we can teach the algorithm very specifically to understand the differences between those two. And then when new novel malware comes along, it can usually accurately identify that without having a specific identity like you'd have to download for your antivirus in the 1990s, right? It just goes, oh, I know that this looks a lot more like other malware I've seen, not like these good files I've seen. Therefore, I'm going to classify this as malware. And that's pretty ubiquitous these days in endpoint security products. The accuracy is very, very high. And it's really useful for detecting malicious Windows executables, malicious Android files, malicious documents, PDFs, Word docs, this type of stuff. And that's something you've been benefiting from for years and years and years already. And we're continuing to invest in that because it's incredibly reliable technology. It's very efficient technology, especially I mentioned mobile phones, like very low battery usage, very low memory footprint, things that fit mobile devices well so you don't have negative outcomes. But I think more and more often now, we're starting to talk about generative AI, and as Frank was referring to, LLMs, right? Large language models. There is a mild distinct difference in that generative AI is a more all-encompassing terms and LLMs are a specific kind of generative AI. But I think most of us have experienced these LLMs through ChatGPT, of course, but also through these image generators, and to the point of having it generate a rap song. You could also have it sing you the rap if you wanted it to. We've all played with these, and this is, of course, a much different kind of artificial intelligence. It's usually not trained on well-defined pieces of data. And in fact, if you look at things like ChatGPT, there's been lawsuits over the fact that they're just like hoovering up everything across the internet to train these models. And as we know from using the internet ourselves, not everything on the internet's true. So there's a lot of stuff getting shoveled into these giant models, and kind of the the idea here is that with enough of this information, it can start to sort of mimic intelligence. It's a predictive model of what's likely to come next, kind of thing. And even though there's some noise in what it's being fed, it largely is accurate, and that's why you see that it lies to you sometimes, right? Most of the time, it's not lying to you. Most of the time, it's figured out the thing to be correct when you ask it a question. But occasionally, it gets it wrong. And the terminology in the industry usually is to call that a hallucination. I find that amusing that we always have to kind of create a new word to cover up for what's happening. It's lying. It's not a hallucination. It's just doesn't know the answer and it's spitting out the wrong thing. But that happens with these, and that's quite, it's not to say that deep learning AI never makes a mistake, but the types of mistakes it makes and how you might design or accommodate what you're expecting to get out the other end is going to be less accurate in a generative AI situation than in a deep learning, which is what leads us to kind of differentiations of types of generative AI. Massive AI models are the ones like ChatGPT that we've all played with that are trained on the entire internet twice over, and that type of thing. And that's where you're having a couple different challenges that I think massive AI models are actually not that practical for the types of things we want to talk about today around how we can use AI to both enhance our security or also watch out for how it may be used against us. Massive models aren't particularly great at that because one of their problems is they require tens of thousands of GPUs to train and huge amounts of energy and power and water to cool these systems. And it's a neat party trick to have something that appears to be human-like in its intelligence, but it's not terribly efficient. And because what it's being trained with is so broad, and those inaccuracies are more likely to emerge in these massive AI models. And there is a bit of a race between OpenAI and Google and other firms to kind of get to this magical artificial general intelligence level of massive model. And that's interesting science, but I think in practice, most of us are probably going to be more interested in looking at small AI models or in fact, distilled models. And some of you may have seen press in recent weeks about a new Chinese LLM called DeepSeek that was kind of challenging OpenAI with far fewer resources. And that's one of the ways they go about this. You can train a massive model on everything on the internet, but then you can sort of start distilling that down into smaller and smaller models that are nearly as smart or nearly as capable as the the massive one, but use a lot less resources. But you can also train them on very specific sets of things that you want them to be able to do. And the examples that we'll talk about, some of those today, are mostly going to be more of these small AI models. I want something that's not going to use lots of energy, but I want it to do one thing very specifically. And I want it to be very accurate, similar to my deep learning AI. And so by training it on a smaller but very well-defined data set of things that are known good or known bad, or a known particular set of problems, I want you to translate this language to that language. And while we may be used to asking ChatGPT to translate English to French, I need to translate English to a SQL query. And it's something I can teach a machine to do quite well. I can build a very small, very efficient model that knows the computer language, SQL, Python, whatever I need it to know, but I can also teach it enough of the English language that I can talk to it naturally and get it to do something useful for me. And I think that's probably the sweet spot of where we're going to see most of the conversation lead us today, is toward those kinds of models that don't require a nuclear power plant to run, but do something incredibly useful to help humans and machines work better together.
Yeah, it's incredibly well said. Frank, as we kind of stare at this list here, is there anything you'd add to what Chet shared? I mean, other than I definitely feel like we probably missed the mark on not creating the rap song and having it performed on today's call. That certainly might have been one of the real world examples we brought to life. But any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's a couple of points I'd like to call out, right? As you can tell in the video, both Chet and I have got a little bit of gray hair. So I would be remiss in telling you if I didn't say this isn't new, right? So Chet talks about deep learning, and at Sophos, a lot of that started with the acquisition of Invincia. But if I remember right, Sophos was kind of working on this before Invincia. And if we go back before that, we actually had machine learning. And if you go all the way back to 2003, we were using machine learning to discover threats and write signatures as part of our anti-malware programs. So this isn't anything new. I mean, those of us with gray hair remember the day and age when we would say, machine learning is written in Python and AI is written in PowerPoint, right? Well, that doesn't apply anymore. Now, in between deep learning and generative AI, I always put another category in there. It's kind of predictive AI. It's how do we start using risk models to be able to look at something and go, well, we're kind of certain this is a threat. We're really certain this is, you know what? We're almost positive that's a threat. Let's just block it and do something, right? And fundamentally, that's where security is going. It's kind of the undersung part of AI. It's how do we get to higher levels of autonomy so we don't have to have a person in the middle? And if we don't have to have a person in the middle, all of a sudden we start creating these exponential impacts. And so we really need to think about AI as how does that security tool kind of alleviate some of the problem? Now, as it relates to generative AI, I will respectfully disagree with Chet, and he can respectfully disagree back. Because I don't think generative AI ever really make lies. We use this term called hallucination. And I think it's important to think about what generative AI is, right? Because most AI is what we call a deterministic model. This, then that, then that, right? When you talk to a data scientist, generative AI is a predictive model, right? What it does is use a bunch of weights and come up with a percentage in terms of this is what we think it is. It's not like it makes up some things. It makes up everything. Everything is a complete makeup based on percentages. It just seems to get it right more often than not. And I think that's really, really important when you're thinking about generative AI, is you always have to note that the outcome of generative AI is probabilistic, and there's always a chance it's going to get it wrong. So we're always going to have feedback loops to validate the answers coming out of generative AI. It's baked into what it does. Like the last point that I would make, and I love this comparison that Chet's driven here between massive AI models and small AI models. And the answer is, when you look at this, is it massive AI models or is it small AI models? And the reality is, yes, it's both. Almost every application now is this cocktail of various AI models. And so a typical application may have 5, 6, 7, 8. If you look in the Sophos platform, I bet you dollars to donuts, if Chet counted all the various AI models in a Sophos EDR application, I bet you there's at least 10, maybe 20, right? So it's important to note that both of these exist concurrently in almost every application. Chet, you can disagree back.
No. That's a great summary. I mean, I still think of it as lying when I get something confidently telling me the wrong answer. But your description is far more accurate scientifically than mine. I've just fallen back on what my mom taught me.
But it is interesting because we're still personifying in both of the languages, right? Whether it's hallucinating or lying, there's an implied intention as opposed to it just maybe having a degree of error, right? That that it can just be wrong. That was the perfect tee up for the next topic we were going to hit here, which is just some of the specific level applications of AI in cybersecurity. And of course, we've got yet another image to share with everybody. And I am wondering whether or not we should be offering some sort of bonus points if you can actually name the inflatable autopilot that is pictured here. But we'll crack on and get into some of the application information. So I'm going to run through these relatively quickly because I think it's going to be far more interesting to have the dialogue like Frank and Chet have already given us here that talks a little bit more about how these applications are in true life really lining up to the desired benefits for the end users. So first up, we're going to hit AI assistance. And similar to the use of Gen AI, this is definitely one of the applications that most people kind of in the broader world are more familiar with. AI assistance is often what comes up or the first that comes to people's mind. And you see this being utilized to help enable less experienced individuals to investigate incidents faster with guided workflows, empowering seasoned analysts to optimize their own work as Frank was kind of alluding to there, so that you've got a level of efficiency with easy access to critical information that might have been more time consuming to put their hands on previously, as well as continually updating the latest threat intelligence and investigation techniques. So having easy access to that bleeding edge research that might make their work that much more effective. Moving from there, we talk about threat prevention. Okay, so how do I use AI to stop more threats in the first place? How can this be used as a preventative tool? This is where you see applications like identifying impersonation attempts that are being used to trick users in a phishing email scam for business email compromise, for example. Stopping new, known and never before seen attacks, as Chet was referencing there, including the kinds of threats that you might see in common Microsoft applications. Detecting malicious URLs, phishing websites, and identifying other web-based threats. I'm going to move on really quickly, but you guys can also interrupt me if something comes to mind as we're chatting through this. The last that we're hitting here is the security operations application. How is AI being used to augment what the human analyst or what the human being is able to do? You see this referencing elements like AI-generated threat scores for detections that help those analysts prioritize where to spend their time and effort to go after the highest impact threats first. Investigation summaries that provide easy to understand overview and detections and recommendations for the end users. So kind of working their way through all of that data so that what's being provided there is more available to individuals who are looking to have an easy to understand overview so they can take action. Command analysis that provides insight into attacker behavior by examining commands that create detections. So getting that next level of information insight that's being pulled up and being served up for the operator so that they're that much more effective and quick at what they're trying to do. That was a bit of a whistle stop tour, but Frank, when you take a look at, whether it's the AI assistance, it's threat prevention and security operations, what do you think are some of the most common things that vendors are promoting and pushing versus what people are actually using in the real world and getting benefit from?
Wow, wow. So the vendors are all pushing their bleeding edge stuff, right?
Yep.
And so no offense, but Sophos and your peers, right? You're always trying to get at the front of the hype cycle, right? And so how do we get more eyes on us? But I think it's interesting. We were commenting a little before this about RSA. And if anything typifies the cybersecurity hype cycle more than anything, it's RSA. Like, you always want to walk the floor at RSA, and it takes you about 30 seconds to go, oh, that's the theme of the show. And another minute to confirm, yes, like, because every vendor's got the same darn thing on every booth. I think there's a, Carolyn, I have to tell you, I think there's a maturing in the industry. And I think the maturing in the industry is that if we go back to, I always kind of call the modern era the start of the target breach, because we started going more and more and more about this technology and that technology because we got caught flat-footed. You know, ransomware started kicking our butts fast. And all of a sudden it was one detection after another, after another, after another. And we were starting to mature a little bit. And then COVID happened and everybody went home and our data went home and our applications went home and microservices started, and that crushed it. But I really think now end users are starting to get more and more about outcomes. And when we start thinking about outcomes, and I love this part on the screen, generated threat scores, we're starting to get better about this idea that cybersecurity is not binary. It's not about catching bad guys. It's about how do we fundamentally reduce our risk posture. And as we're getting smarter about implementing new tools, it's all about how does that tool decrease our risk score? How do we buy down our risk?
Yeah.
And as we think about buying down our risk, a lot of times the ROI of these tools is now measured in terms of what is the impact on people? How can I either have junior level analysts doing more? How do I take my rock star analysts and have them do more? And a lot of times some of these things aren't about the advanced, it's about the easy. Like, as we talk about Gen AI tools, a lot of times what they're simply looking to do is, how do I have these be my universal translator? I think Chet was talking about this, right? Like, I might be good at a query, but I might be a little uncomfortable because I only do it once every 2 weeks. Like, I can get myself 80% there. Well, the LLM gets me all the rest there. And so now I'm confident. Now I'm excited. Now I can attack some of these things. I think the other side of this that gets less hype, but I think more important, is what about all the threats and mitigations that happen without me even seeing it?
Yeah, stopping more.
Stopping more. The best alert is the alert I never see. Right? And that alert that I never see sometimes might just fire because the AI is able to generate a threat score, which comes to, it's such a thing. And it's not hard. Like, it's not about, in my opinion, Chet will probably disagree with me, it's not about the intellectually complicated. It's about the simple, but putting them together, right? If all of a sudden I notice that my endpoint is reaching out to a malicious IP in China, might be malicious, might not. If that started from a PowerShell script, that might be malicious, that might not. If that PowerShell script was launched from a Word document, that Word document came from an email from someone external, and that external is kind of a questionable email address. Like, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I can go, hey, I think that's bad.
Yeah.
Not complicated analysis, but those systems to piece those breadcrumbs together, that's hard work. And I think that's where we're starting to differentiate. Chet, you're dying to tell me I'm off base.
No,
Please.
I'm absolutely loving it. You're describing stuff we've been doing in our endpoint for years, and that's exactly what we do, right? And it's providing that context by logging all of these individually small things and painting a more detailed picture to make a decision about it, right? And your example is something literally that our product does now, and that's one of the ways we protect people is looking at that entire that entire chain. And each one of those things individually is not malicious. A file being opened from an email is not malicious. PowerShell scripts are not inherently malicious, right? But in combination, that paints a picture that clearly is malicious. And this is where AI has its benefits, is it can process these massive quantities of data that a human could do as well. It just takes us a really long time to figure out the example that you just painted, Frank. I mean, I can go into my EDR tool and find all that evidence in a threat hunt after the fact. But the problem is it's after the fact, and now the thing's already run, and the attacker's in my environment. And by being able to do it in somewhat real time and process these massive quantities of data that my human brain just can't do in the speed that I need it to do it, helps me shift back toward prevention, right? Because when we're talking about managing risk, which is ultimately all security is, and I know the hacker nerds do not like to hear that we're just fancy risk managers, but we're auditors, we're risk managers. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just what we do. And we also are trying to find that balance between prevention, detection, and response. We know prevention is never going to be 100% successful. We get vaccines, we do different things, but we know it's not necessarily going to prevent, but it hopefully makes us less sick. It's no different than when we're looking at risk in our IT environments, right? We're going to try to prevent everything we can up front, but when we don't, we have to be able to detect and respond quickly and accurately to what it is that managed to get past our defenses. And that's the other place that I think AI is playing a role, is helping those humans be more efficient. And I think Frank and I are on the same page here. It's a lot of this stuff is just pragmatic, and that's where I'm loving these tools, right? Like I do have the skills in my past to analyze a malicious obfuscated PowerShell script, but it's going to take me a half an hour to take this blob and figure out what it did. And now I can dump it into an LLM and say, what's this PowerShell do? And you know what? If it hallucinates one thing about that, I don't really care. In general, I just want to know, what was this thing trying to do? Oh, it was modifying some registry keys, and it copied a file, and it did this and it did that. If that's 80-90% accurate as a human, I can just move on. I don't care if it's got a mild hallucination, because I'm overseeing it and it's helping me act faster and more efficiently to work through processes. And when I look at our active adversary report that we publish every year, one of the things that we track very closely is time to detect and time to respond being a major factor in how much damage is often done to the victim when in a ransomware attack, for example. And the amount of cost of an incident to a business goes up dramatically with time. So the faster I can shorten that time to detect and time to respond, the less costly those incidents are going to be. And I think that's where we're going to start seeing a lot of the benefits of AI, whether it's helping me write queries for my MDR so I can more quickly find artifacts in my environment when I'm doing a threat hunt, whether it's helping me analyze that obfuscated PowerShell script, or whether it's preventative, and like in Frank's example, all of these things combined are helping me shorten those windows and lower my cost per incident.
Can I riff on what Chet just said?
Please do.
He said two things, in my opinion, that were incredibly powerful. Of course, everything that Chet says is smart, but for me, two things I want to talk about: time to detect and time to respond, right? Because time to detect talks about the efficiency of how we find things. Time to respond implies how long it takes us to make corrective action. And I think those are the two core numbers, right? There's this book. Sorry if you guys aren't sports fans. I live and breathe sports. And so there was this famous book that came out called Moneyball. And Moneyball was all about the way that we looked at this game called baseball. And we'd been looking at it the same way for 100 years. And finally, somebody looked at it and goes, like, we're looking at this all wrong. Like, we're all worried about how many hits this batter gets. We don't care if he hits the ball. We just care if he makes it on base. And I think that's what we do in cybersecurity. Like, we're constantly looking, here's how many blocks I did. Here's how many alerts I generated. Here's how many DLP detections I had. Do we care? No. All we cared about is, did we get on base? And it's how long did it take us to detect that piece of maliciousness? And then once we detect it, how long does it take us to remediate it? And I think if we start looking at tools, because sometimes we get in this whack-a-mole detection focus, if we start focusing on mean time to detect and mean time to remediate, all of a sudden we'll notice that we'll start focusing on the right thing. We'll start focusing on getting on base, and then the emphasis will move from we can't always prevent 100%, but why can't we get that prevention a little bit better? So I think we can do that by focusing on the right things.
It's a couple things that are just jumping out as I'm hearing you guys talk. One, I think I'm having a flashback to a conversation I believe the three of us may have had, speaking of this not being new, but about the importance of context, right? And the more that we can kind of operationalize that context, it makes our humans better at the jobs we're asking them to do. And one question I want to ask you on this before we get into the pitfalls or the malicious applications or things to be concerned about is you talked a bit about the business focused benefits, Chet, and we've been talking about the efficacy of this approach for cyber defense and how AI can help us be better at the outcomes that you're describing, Frank. If, bringing you back to the sense of that there's been some maturing here, is it the shift from the action to the outcome, right? So that if we're thinking about what are we trying to impact, one of the things we are hearing a lot of users ask about is how AI can help achieve some of those business focused benefits, like addressing employee burnout or like driving return on cybersecurity investments. Are we starting to see that in the real world, or is that starting to become a reality for people? Frank, maybe I'll ask you to comment on that first.
Yes, I think it is. I absolutely think it is. I don't think we have any choice, right? Because, we can't find enough cybersecurity people. And once we find them, we're struggling to keep them. So whatever we have to do to keep them, we do. And so when we start talking about what do we do, look, most cybersecurity professionals, they want to fight bad guys and gals. That's what they want to do. They don't want to spend all day patching CVEs. So why can't we automate some of that? They don't want to do manual digging through a threat research. Why don't we correlate it together? A lot of times when we talk about automation, I love your point about context. How do we use AI to apply context at scale? Let's serve this up so that cybersecurity professional can actually do what they want to do. Instead of doing the boring, they're doing the advanced. And so I really think that's one way that we can do it. The second way is just thinking about every cybersecurity tool should be thought of in terms of what is its ROI and how do we improve that ROI? And that ROI is measured in hours and time for cybersecurity professionals. Because the other part of it is not wanting to do the mundane. Let's face it, there is no cybersecurity professional that's had a shortage of work hours on Friday nights, Saturday nights, and Sundays. Every cybersecurity professional can tell you something about, well, I had to miss half of Christmas because of this attack. I had to miss July because of Kaseya. I had to miss this because of that. The more that the security gets us off hour work and onto regular hour work, of course, that's going to improve morale.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Chet, how about from you? I mean, all those examples I think are probably sending chills down everybody's because everybody's got their stories, right? Anything that you'd add to that?
Not really. I mean, I think we all agree that sitting around and triaging alerts is not nearly as interesting as doing a threat hunt and tracking down an attacker that's made it past the bastion wall. And but we do need to keep in mind that there is benefit to that experience, and we have to find some balance too, because we can't have cybersecurity teams only made up of industry veterans, and some of that learning process for our young people coming out of school and things is going through some of those. Some of that tedium. So we have to, I think, having humans in the loop is a benefit there, and that it gives people experience working with the AI to graduate into being expert threat hunters down the road, and we should keep that in mind as well.
Now remember, we're talking about cybersecurity professionals here, right? When you start going to smaller and smaller sizes of business, when you start to get into SMB, hey, I owned an SMB. You know what was rewarding to me? Not doing it at all. That was rewarding to me because
improvement, right? Yeah.
I'm managing a small business. What am I looking to do? I'm trying to I'm trying to give glorious experiences to customers. Cybersecurity doesn't like help my customer doesn't do that. If I said, hey, I've got a perfectly safe environment for you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, they're going, thanks.
Please.
Like
Yes.
that's what they expect, right? And so the more and more, like for a security professional, if you're lucky enough to be big enough to have one, yes, you want to create good experiences. When we get down channel, hey, the more automated, the better.
Well, and it doesn't seem like the industry is giving us any shortage of lessons to be teaching these individuals as they move into their professional careers, right? We've got more work than we do the individuals to do it. So we are going to talk about the malicious applications of AI. And this is, there are a lot. We've talked about some of these already today, but these are just a handful of the malicious elements or the pitfalls, that potential risks that people might need to be considering. Fraudulent websites and phishing lures, AI-generated ransomware code, vulnerabilities targeting AI tools, right? So exploiting those vulnerabilities, social engineering research, deep fakes. Frank, which one of these jumps out for you? Which one of these would you call out that you've seen most prevalent in the real world?
Well, I think I've seen like all of them. The one that I would call out would be social engineering research. As we've moved to AI, I always say that cyber miscreants are like water. They go to the place of least resistance, right? Mm-hmm. And so, building very complex applications of malware, yes, they can do that. But social engineering, basic phishing fueled by, AI, that's really where everything's going right now, is just how do we leverage AI as an attacker, right? Such that we can have really great lures to increase our effectiveness. So it's not the complex it's not the AI generated ransomware code that I'm more worried about. I'm worried about the simple, the easy, the clever. Because if I'm thinking about the way I would typify the cyber threat landscape right now, I would use the word clever.
Which is problematic, because that what used to be one of the ways that we trained our users to be part of the solution, right? Was to look for the lack of clever, or the grammar issues, or the things where you're like, just slow down and read it. And as it gets more clever, those answers are a little bit less effective, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the tools have to do the job. We can't rely on the users anymore, unfortunately. And like that social engineering, what AI allows it to do isn't necessarily to be more clever, but it's to be clever at scale. Mm-hmm. Like before, you had to handcraft stuff, and a human had to do it. And if English wasn't your native language and you were targeting English users, you had to put some effort into getting it right. And that was slow. And it meant you could only target a smaller number of victims per cycle of time, because it was manual work that the criminal had to do if they were going to bother to step up their game and try to do it well. Mm-hmm. And now they can unleash, not just perfect grammar and spelling, but iterative variations of a scam at scale from a single human without any extra effort. And most of us have probably experienced family or loved ones that have maybe fallen for a romance scam or a crypto scam. A lot of these start on WhatsApp or over a text message or these types of things. That used to be done in literal sweatshops in Southeast Asia of humans sitting there sending those text messages. And now an LLM can generate millions of them per minute and send them out with no humans behind it at all. And so the scam isn't more sophisticated than it was. It's the same age-old scam that's been going on. I mean, romance scams go back thousands of years. This is not new. But the ability to generate high volumes of high-quality scam is new. And it means that we have a new threat to face, and we can't rely on humans to very likely be able to spot these things as easily as we could before.
Yeah, we've seen these moments in cybersecurity, right, where the proliferation and the access of the tools to the broader sort of cyber criminal base just raises the risk for the other side of the coin. When you stare at some of these, what are some of the potential risks that you think, well, they might be a bit immature today, we should start to be thinking about how to be prepared in the future, in the near future? Chet, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of pivot on what, I think Frank was talking about sort of mass cybercrime type folks when, in his example, and the fact that they generally aren't going to do something more complex. If we step up and look at some other adversaries that might put extra complexity in, as we learn with everything else in cybersecurity, whatever the higher end threat actor is doing today will come down market tomorrow to be available to the less skilled threat actor, or we will be easier for those people to consume. And so the one I'm seeing today is already being leveraged by the sophisticated threat actor is deepfake. We've seen numerous headlines around the world of deepfake audio being used in business email compromise attacks to mimic the CEO or CFO of a firm and get somebody to do a wire transfer of a large sum of money to the criminals. Those are handcrafted attacks that are targeting a very specific company. They're not broad attacks today. And that's because it still takes a bit of time and effort to make those deep fakes and to come up with studying your victim and getting enough audio that you can clone a voice. There's work involved. And because there's work involved, most criminals aren't doing it, but some are. I think we're going to see, as the ease with which and the smaller number of audio samples you need to make a good deep fake, when those things become cheaper and easier, they're going to come down market where everyday criminals will start abusing those tools as well. And today it's really hard to make a deep fake video without thousands of dollars and a lot of effort. So we don't see that at all. The audio has come down to being cheap, but still requires effort, which means a limited number of threat actors are bothering. As this continues to get cheaper and better, as everything does in technology, that will become more accessible and may start seeing a lot more abuse of that in the future. So we should be hardening our processes to be resistant to these types of attacks now, so that we're ready for that change when it comes, whether it's 18 months or 3 years from now.
Okay, so part of that hardening is to strengthen our human-led defenses with working with vendors that are using AI capabilities in their own cybersecurity solutions. Frank, maybe we promised some pragmatic advice for our audience today. How would an end user assess the processes and controls by which vendors are starting to develop AI capabilities in their own cybersecurity solutions? What kind of questions should people be asking of their vendors?
Wow, it's okay. I would say let's put that in two categories. Let's put that in the category of your cybersecurity vendors and then your other vendors.
And other vendors, yeah.
There's a couple of, I think CISA has got some recommendations of 17 things they think every application should have. Every application that you buy should have enable MFA by default, right? Every application you have should enable SSO at not add an additional fee, because everyone seems to want to charge more for SSO. There's a whole bunch of standard things that we should be looking for in our third-party applications. So in doing that, I'd recommend the CISA website. Like, I thought it was fantastic. I stumbled on it. I actually heard Jen Easterly present it one time. It's fantastic. So that's one thing. When we look at cybersecurity tools, I really think what we need to do is up level a little bit, right? Because I don't want end users to start trying to assess at an individual detailed level the value of individual AI technologies. And I'm pretty important about that, right? Because I think for the history of cybersecurity, what vendors have a tendency to do is take all their new features and they push them and they tell you about all their great new features. We got all these great features, right? And what it does is they explain the technology, and then it pushes the responsibility of translating what that technology means to the end user. Like, oh, I'm supposed to know as an end user that your technology is going to help me, and here's how it's going to help me. And sometimes as an end user, we get it right, and sometimes as an end user, we get it wrong, right? This is hard stuff. Mm-hmm. I think instead, we need to change the focus, right? Because we're not buying a cybersecurity tool. When somebody comes to Sophos, they're not buying from Sophos, they're investing in Sophos, right? Because the cost of the tool is probably 10% of the cost. The people in process are probably the other 90%. And so as we look at how do we evaluate AI, We evaluate AI based on the outcomes. We refuse to start getting at a detailed arms race thing. It's like, how are you, Sophos, going to help me with mean time to detection, to use Chet words? How are you going to help me with mean time to remediation, right? Those are the two key things. And we looked at that over time, right? Because if you buy the best tool today and it doesn't have the proper roadmap, 2 years from now, you got to switch, you failed. Like you lost your investment.
Yeah.
So it's really based on outcomes. I think technology is important, but you can look at a company and go, okay, here's a pattern of technology and how they've been able to deliver it. You can look at, hey, here's things that we do, but more importantly, what you want to hear about is how are they taking these AI tools and translating to outcomes. And I honestly, Carolyn, I believe this to my soul. The best AI in cybersecurity is the AI I never notice.
Those are wonderful words, and probably the perfect place we are just getting to the top of our time here. On this last point, I will just let the audience know, Sophos as a vendor has an upcoming webinar, kind of part 2 of the conversation we're having with Frank and Chet today, where we've invited our Chief Development Officer, John Peterson. He's going to come on and talk a little bit more specifically about all the different points of where we're leveraging AI to deliver superior cybersecurity outcomes. So Frank, using that exact word, right, is how is this going to change the game for the end user? And ideally, it's the ones you never see or the ones you never feel or the ones you don't know about, as you've said, that it's just reducing that attack surface or reducing that risk at the front end. We're going to post the link to that webcast here in the chat. It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen here. So if you haven't registered for that, we do hope you guys can join us. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I think we could keep going for quite a bit more. But I really just want to thank both of you and maybe give you a chance, Frank, to leave us with any of your parting words before we say goodbye to the audience.
God, the only parting words I can say is, hey, don't let your vendors force you to figure out how AI benefits you. I'll once again, I'll quote Chet: mean time to detection, mean time to remediation. Everything else is just irrelevant.
That's perfect. Thank you, Chet. Thank you, Frank. Really appreciate both your time and your insight today. And to everyone in our audience, we're really grateful for you spending some time with us. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.